Media playback is unsupported on your device. Media caption March Gen Sibizi Somoyo read out a statement on national TV early on Wednesday. The military has taken control in Zimbabwe but said President Robert Mugabe, in power since 1980, was safe. After seizing state TV, an army spokesman announced it was targeting people close to Mr. Mugabe. South Africa's President Jacob Zuma later said he had spoken to Mr. Mugabe, who had indicated that he was confined to his home but said that he was fine. The move may be a bid to replace Mr. Mugabe with his sacked deputy, Emmerson Mnangagwa, BBC correspondents say. The dismissal of Mr. Mnangagwa last week had left Mr. Mugabe's wife Grace as the president's likely successor. Heavy gun and artillery fire could be heard in northern parts of the capital Harare early on Wednesday. A statement read out by a general on air denied it was a coup. There was no immediate word from the president himself. Mr. Mugabe, 93, has dominated the impoverished country's political scene since independence from the UK. Mr. Zuma earlier said he hoped events in Zimbabwe would not lead to unconstitutional changes of government. Messages appeared on a Twitter account purportedly run by the ruling ZANU-PF party saying Mr. Mugabe had been detained. But there has been no confirmation by the army and it is not clear who runs the account. The UK Foreign Office advised Britons currently in Harare to remain safely at home or in their accommodation until the situation becomes clearer, while the US Embassy in Harare advised US citizens in Zimbabwe to shelter in place until further notice. Skip Twitter post by US Embassy Harare. Due to ongoing uncertainty in Zimbabwe, the US Embassy in Harare will be minimally staffed and closed to the public on November 15. Embassy personnel will continue to monitor the situation closely. At state depth, U.S. Embassy Harare at US Embassy Harare November 15, 2017. End of Twitter post by at US Embassy Harare. China, Zimbabwe's biggest trading partner, says it is closely watching the situation and hopes that the relevant parties can properly handle their internal affairs. How did the military justify its move? Troops in armored vehicles have been out in the streets of the capital Harare since Tuesday, after soldiers overran the headquarters of the ZBC broadcaster. March Gen Sibizi Somoyo went on air to say the military wished to assure the nation that His Excellency the President and his family are safe and sound and their security is guaranteed. Image caption Soldiers patrolled Harare on Wednesday. We are only targeting criminals around him who are committing crimes that are causing social and economic suffering in the country, he said. As soon as we have accomplished our mission, we expect that the situation will return to normalcy. Other key points of the statement include citizens should remain calm and limit unnecessary movement. The military assures the Zimbabwean judiciary that its independence is guaranteed. Security services should cooperate for the good of our country and any provocation would be met with an appropriate response. All leave for the defense forces is cancelled and personnel should return to barracks immediately. It is not clear who is leading the military action. Army Chief Gen. Constantino Chiwenga, who visited China last week, said on Monday the army was prepared to act to end purges within ZANU-PF. The old guard strikes back. B. Joseph Winter, BBC News website Africa editor. This is all about the leadership succession, as Mr. Mugabe's powers finally falter. The people who fought in the 1970s guerrilla war against white minority rule still dominate Zimbabwe's government and especially its security forces, and they're worried about losing their power and the wealth it generates. In his statement on Monday, Gen Chiwenga warned against the purging, which is clearly targeting members of the party with a liberation background. This was obviously a reference to the sacking last week of Mr. Mugabe's once loyal deputy, Mr. Mnangagwa, a former defense minister, spy chief and veteran of the War of Independence. He and Grace Mugabe, who is 4 decades younger than her husband, had been seen as the main candidates to succeed Mr. Mugabe. Mrs. Mugabe's supporters are known as Generation 40 or G40, a name which signals a changing of the guard in Zimbabwe, at least partially, 37 years after independence. So this military action is the old guard reasserting its authority. Mr. Mugabe was the political leader of the guerrilla war, so the army always professed loyalty to him until he explicitly came out in favor of his wife. Read more. What do we know of the shooting? The firing was coming from northern suburbs where Mr. Mugabe and a number of government officials, the BBC's Shingai Nyoka reports from Harare. A witness told AFP news agency it could be heard near Mr. Mugabe's residence in the suburb of Borrowdale early on Wednesday. Some staff at ZBC were manhandled when the soldiers moved in, sources told Reuters. Has anyone been detained? A government source told Reuters news agency that Finance Minister Ignatius Chomba had been detained. He is a leading member of a faction of ZANU-PF led by Grace Mugabe. Is this a coup? Alex Magasa, former advisor to Zimbabwean opposition leader Morgan Tsvangirai, told the BBC they have decided not to call it a coup because they know that a coup does not sell, it will be condemned. Image caption: General Chiwenga had warned of a military takeover, but as far as authority is concerned it seems very clear that President Mugabe is now just a president in name and authority is now residing in the military. ZANU-PF had accused Gen Chiwenga of treasonable conduct after he issued his warning that the army might intervene. What was the political situation before the army acted? Last month, Mrs. Mugabe accused allies of Mr. Mnangagwa of planning a coup. Image caption: Grace Mugabe is seen as a potential successor to her elderly husband. Image caption: Emerson Mnangagwa is seen here at a recent funeral. The rivalry between Mrs. Mugabe and Mr. Mnangagwa split ZANU-PF. Gen Chiwenga is a close ally of Mr. Mnangagwa and both are veterans of the 1970s war which ended white minority rule. The leader of the war veterans, Chris Musvangwa, welcomed the military move, telling Reuters this is a correction of a state that was careening off the cliff. It's the end of a very painful and sad chapter in the history of a young nation, in which a dictator, as he became old, surrendered his court to a gang of thieves around his wife. Are you in Zimbabwe? Only if it is safe to do so. Email haveyourSay@bbc.co.uk with your experiences. Please include a contact number if you are willing to speak to a BBC journalist. You can also contact us in the following ways: WhatsApp 447525900971. Send picture s video to your pics at bbc.co.uk. Upload your pictures video here. Tweet at bbc_haveyourSay. Send an SMS or MMS to 61124 or 44 7624 800 100.